What's going on in our mind when you don't respond? The silent power, how silence can transform relationships. Imagine this situation. You decide not to respond to a message, a phone call, or you simply walk away from a conversation. As simple as this action seems, what happens behind the silence is profoundly psychological and emotional. What many don't realize is that when you choose silence, you are creating an emotional dynamic that can transform the entire perception of the relationship, both for you and for the other person. When you go silent, you're not just saying no to someone's words or actions. You are introducing uncertainty, questions, and internal reactions that reverberate in the other person's mind. Silence is not empty. It is a space filled with unspoken emotions. In this video, we will explore how the silence reverberates in her emotions, why it is so disturbing, and how it can be a powerful tool to redefine the dynamic of a relationship. Get ready to understand the psychological power of silence and how it affects the mind of the person who receives the absence of a response. The psychological warfare of silence. The emotional void created by the absence of a response. The first natural reaction to being ignored or not receiving a response is a feeling of loss. Silence is a powerful form of communication, perhaps more powerful than words. When a man decides not to respond, the woman begins to experience cognitive dissonance, an internal conflict caused by a lack of clarity. She starts to fill the gaps with speculation, creating various narratives about what might be happening. Is he punishing me? Has he stopped caring? What happened? Is he indifferent? Is he done? This constant search for answers and clarity triggers a psychological process that generates anxiety and insecurity. The woman, being emotionally in tune and with a great capacity to perceive nonverbal cues, starts asking these questions even without realizing it. For many, silence can be interpreted as emotional abandonment, even if the man doesn't have that intention. This behavior creates an emotional void where there was once predictability and emotional stability. Why is silence psychologically disturbing? Human beings, by nature, seek resolution and clarity. When there is a break in communication, the mind enters into conflict. In biological and psychological terms, the lack of a response is perceived as an emotional threat. Our need for closure is so great that the brain enters a kind of obsessive cycle, trying to fill the gaps left by silence. This creates a feeling of loss of control and an increase in anxiety, especially for women who often have a keener perception of unspoken emotional signals. When you decide not to respond, you interrupt the communication dynamic she had learned to expect from you. You are no longer the predictable man who always offers answers or comfort. This void makes her question her own emotional security and the stability of the relationship. The intuitive female mind is designed to look for signs of security and stability. When these signals are interrupted, emotional discomfort arises, forcing her to reevaluate the relationship. The interruption of the emotional narrative. When silence breaks the story she created, many women, when involved in a relationship, begin to create an emotional narrative about how things will unfold. They expect you to always be available, to always respond, for the dynamic to be constant. When you step back, this breaking of the narrative creates a psychological shock. She not only loses control of the situation, but also loses control over her own perception of the relationship. How silence forces internal reflection. The silence leads to intense reflection. She starts asking herself, did I say something wrong? Was I disrespectful? Was I being excessive? This process can be painful, but at the same time, it becomes a moment of self-knowledge. When you don't respond, you are not just giving space for silence, but forcing her to confront her own attitudes, words, and expectations. The absence of a response then becomes a reflection of the need for self-reflection. The silence you impose is not an empty answer, but a way to help her see herself more clearly, without the constant protection or softening of your actions. It is a crucial moment of personal growth. How her emotional control begins to crumble. In most relationships, especially those that involve a certain level of emotional dependency, there is an unspoken exchange of control and power. Control does not manifest in an aggressive way, but it is more subtle. The woman might expect a response from you whenever she needs it, or feel that she has control over how you react to situations. When you break this pattern, when you go silent, you interrupt the balance of control she had established. Her psychological control begins to crumble, and this can be profoundly unsettling for her. This happens because she was used to having predictability about your actions. She knew what to expect from you. You would respond, you would react in a predictable way, you would be available to solve things. Why silence is an invasion of her control space. For many women, this predictability-based control offers a sense of emotional security. They don't have to worry about what their partner thinks or feels because they will always have emotional access to him. When you step back and don't respond, you destroy that security and force her to confront what she was not willing to see. The relationship is not one-sided. She no longer has control over the dynamic. This silence is not just an emotional challenge for her, but also a psychological awakening that forces her to question what she really wants and needs from the relationship. The fact that you do not give in to this need for control creates a tension that goes beyond the emotional. She begins to realize that you are no longer a predictable presence, but someone with your own emotions, thoughts, and boundaries. The mystery created by silence. How it generates curiosity and attraction. When you step away in silence, something very powerful happens. You become a mystery. This mystery can be one of the most powerful tools a man has in his emotional dynamic. Mystery generates curiosity, and curiosity generates desire. When you become an unpredictable figure, she starts to wonder about you in a way that wouldn't happen if you were always accessible. How silence creates an emotional void she needs to fill. The silence you create forces the other person to question what they have lost. She begins to wonder where you are, who you are with, what you are doing. The emotional void you leave behind becomes a psychological burden that her mind tries to fill. She starts to fantasize, to create stories about you, to question what might be happening in your life, and this traps her in a cycle of thoughts and assumptions. This process is more powerful than any statement or message you could send because the human brain tends to attribute greater value to that which is scarce or inaccessible. The power of silence and the path to emotional self-sufficiency. Silence is not just a way to step away. It is a tool for emotional self-sufficiency. When you decide not to respond, you are sending a powerful message that your value does not depend on the other person's validation. You reclaim your emotional autonomy and refuse to submit to dynamics that are not reciprocal or healthy. This act of emotional self-sufficiency is not about indifference, but about preserving your inner peace and ensuring you don't lose yourself in a relationship that does not offer you the same. Transform your emotional and relational life. Now that you understand the powerful impact of silence, it's time to put this new emotional understanding into practice. If you are tired of living in a constant search for validation or feel lost in unbalanced relationship dynamics, subscribe to our channel. Follow our videos to learn more about how to manage your emotional self-sufficiency, build healthy relationships, and preserve your inner peace. Click the subscribe button now and begin your journey to transform your relationships and create a more balanced and healthy emotional space for yourself. Don't miss the next videos where we will explore how you can face emotional challenges in a mature and balanced way.